Well, we had our first snow here where I live this year for 2013. Wasn't too bad. Had about an inch. And didn't stop me. Went ahead and went on a bike ride anyway. The roads aren't really too bad. But it's definitely not what good weather conducive to working on any of the cars or anything like that. So I figured I'd do a little bit of a video related to this Crown Victoria that I got not too long ago. And if you've seen my other videos, like I do with any car that I get, whether it's new or used, I change all the fluids, the engine oil, transmission, differential, and brake fluid and coolant and all of that kind of stuff. And on this car I also change the fuel filter, and I get them analyzed. And in so doing, I can make a very good assessment on the overall condition of this car. Just like the F-250 there, this is a 1995 model, built in 1994, and it belonged to my grandfather, and it has about, now it has about 12,400 miles on it, which is just incredible for an 18-year-old car. When I got it, it had, I think, 11,600 or something, somewhere around in there. But I had all those fluids analyzed and everything, and it took a while, but all the reports came back, and I have them here, sitting on the trunk of the Lincoln Continental. And don't mind this, I'm not on any kind of testosterone therapy, I assure you. I dated somebody that sold, a pharmaceutical representative that sold this stuff, and so now I have tons and tons and tons and tons of post-it notes. So that was apparently the only long-lasting thing that came out of that relationship, was a year's supply of post-it notes. But anyway, that's neither here nor there. This is the first analysis report that is going to be for the engine, and we have a sump capacity of 4 quarts. And as expected, the analysis came back very clean. That oil only had about 447 miles on it, and unfortunately the oil on that car was the only thing that was changed periodically. And it's divided into several sections. You've got your wear metal sections, your contaminant section, multi-source metals, like additives, and then a specific additive section. Overall, the report came back very good. We have hardly any iron. Iron will be coming from the cylinder bores, the camshafts, and crankshaft. No chromium, no nickel. Nickel's a part of some kinds of steel alloys, cast iron alloys. Very little aluminum on that vehicle. The 4.6 liter V8 has aluminum heads and a cast iron block. So we've got very little wear going on in the heads where the camshafts and valves are. That's a single overhead can V8. Hardly any copper. And 0 lead and 0 tin. The lead, tin, and copper form a trio, making up what they call the tri-metal bearings. It's a steel-backed babbitt. So you have 3 layers of material, lead being the softest material, which kind of sacrifices itself on the bearing. And so this basically means that we have hardly any or 0 bearing wear going on in that engine whatsoever. So we're not going to have any rod knock or anything like that. I wouldn't expect there to be any with, when this was taken, 11,212 miles. Here we get into the contaminant metals, and one of the main things to look for here is the silicon, basically dirt, little pieces of sand and everything getting sucked up into the intake manifold and making it past the air filter and acting as abrasives into the engine. That number is really important because it tells you how good your air filtration is, your intake filtration, as well as if you have any vacuum leaks or anything like that. Any kind of vacuum leak can also serve as a source of dirt entry from the road into your engine. Then we have some of the multi-source metals, molybdenum being an additive usually associated with EP greases and oils, extreme pressure. Only have 78 parts per million there. It can sometimes be part of piston rings. So very little there. And we have our additive materials here. Calcium and barium mainly being part of your detergent package and motor oil. And then your phosphorus and zinc additives, which are the anti-wear additives. And because this is a API-SN oil, or ILAC GF5 oil, the zinc and phosphorus is going to be below 800 parts per million on these oils. So the anti-wear properties of the motorcraft oil aren't really where they should be compared to oils just a few years ago that meet, for example, API-SL specifications, which would have zinc and phosphorus levels about twice those numbers. Viscosity at 100 degrees Celsius or 212 Fahrenheit is registered on this as being a little bit low, or flagged as being a little bit low. The owner's manual does call for a 5W30 for that vehicle, so that's what I assumed was in there. It turns out being 8.3, if we look on our viscosity chart. It really is a 5W20 oil. And a lot of the newer Fords have gone down to a 5W20 oil, so it's not surprising that the dealership, which is where this car was serviced at, went ahead and used a 5W20 oil in here anyway. I've since changed it to a synthetic 10W40 oil for much better protection. And the oil also has a 12 TBN versus just a 4.6 TBN. Total base number is a measure of the oil's reserve alkalinity, which means how much acid it's capable of neutralizing. 12 is basically the max. You usually won't find that unless you are running some kinds of diesel oils. 4.6 or 5 or 6, that's usually the normal number. And another thing to look out for over here is your sodium and potassium values as well too. They're in a lot of cases components of some antifreezes, some ethylene glycol antifreezes. So if you start to see these numbers trending upward along with your water trending upward, you can suspect you've got a head gasket problem or a cracked head or cracked cylinders, liners, something like that. You're beginning to get water into the oil somehow, and you can use these reports to give you a warning sign well ahead of time before you actually start to see the visible symptoms of steam coming out of the tailpipe and stuff like that. And we have very little fuel dilution. It's actually a little bit higher than most analysis reports that I see. Usually I see 0.1, but this car being driven 400 miles per year, I doubt that engine really ever had a chance to warm up past 212 degrees. So consequently, it really hasn't had a lot of time to burn off any kind of fuel vapors that have bypassed the pistons due to blow-by. So that number is just a little bit higher, but not even flagged at all. Perfectly normal. Wouldn't cause any harm. So based on all these results that we see here, that engine is just in fantastic condition with a little over 12,000 miles on it now. There's no reason it shouldn't last till 150, 200, or 300,000 miles. And so, working our way back, next I did the transmission, and luckily enough, it does have the AODE transmission. Stands for Automatic Overdrive Electronic. I think in 1995, this was actually made in 1994, October 94. I think sometime in 1995 they went to the 4R70W transmission, which did not have a torque converter drain plug, so I got real lucky with this. I was able to drain out all 14 quarts of fluid and get a complete flush. And also, if you guys remember when I first got the car, it had a shift concern, a torque converter shutter concern right in third gear and also in fourth gear, when the torque converter would begin to lock up, you would feel a shudder in the drivetrain, much like clutch chatter in a manual transmission car. If you've got some corrosion or grease on the flywheel and you just begin to engage that clutch, it'll have a lot of stick-slip friction and kind of slip on that flywheel and cause a vibration. That's exactly what was going on with this. I was able to control it by backing off the gas a little bit to let it fully engage, and once I did that it was okay, but still it was quite alarming with the car that only had 11,000 miles on it. I was beginning to wonder if I had major transmission problems. So starting simple and then working your way up to more complicated solutions, and I was going to do it anyway, I went ahead and changed the fluid. And unfortunately, looking at the results, there's not really anything in here that would stand out as any defects in this fluid that would cause such an obvious drivability concern. We've got fairly low amounts of iron, which would be coming from the planetary gear train assembly. Same thing with nickel, is used as an alloy in some steels. The transmission case is aluminum, so we have a little bit of aluminum material in there. Copper mainly can be found in the clutch pack material, and it's normal to have levels that high. I'd like to see it a little bit lower, but that number might be 440 or higher because of the torque converter shudder concern that was going on. We had a lot of slipping going on there, which would have made that number be a little bit higher than normal, which is one of the reasons why I was very ginger with the accelerator when that happened and backed off the gas as soon as I felt that vibration until I could address it with a fluid change. And just like with the engine, there are bearings inside that transmission. There are bushings and needle bearings and ball bearings and things like that, and they contain lead, and that's flagged as green, so that's fairly normal. And just like with the engine, we have silicone. Transmissions actually have a vent on the outside. In this transmission, the AODE, the vent is on the top of the transmission. And we have very low values, 8 for silicon, so we don't have a lot of dirt getting in there. Sodium and potassium aren't really too much to be concerned about. There's no antifreeze or anything like that in there. You could get some sodium from road salt, when, from the snow and everything, when they put snow on the roads. But that car really wasn't driven in the wintertime all that much, and it doesn't snow around here very often. And we have our additive metals there, and because this is an ATF, you don't really need higher levels of zinc and phosphorus. But you do have some detergency going on in there. That's where that calcium's coming from. And they flagged the viscosity as being a little bit low. For some reason, they thought that the fluid was the Mercon low viscosity ATF. It's a newer kind of ATF for some of the more fuel-efficient cars. It really is not. The car was running just regular Mercon fluid. So that's why that got flagged. Otherwise, that value is actually within normal ranges. Although the new fluid that I added, the viscosity is around 7, so a little bit thicker, which is nice. And for transmission fluids, we're not really so concerned with the base number as we are with the acid number. This tells us how acidic the fluid is versus the base number, which tells us how much acid the fluid could absorb. Transmissions don't really produce acids like engines do. Engines, they produce, if it's a diesel, sulfuric acid, or if it's gas, it's going to be nitric acid compounds. Either way, it's an acid, and so you have to have the fluid have a certain base number to counteract that. But the acid number in hydraulic transmission fluid is an indication of the condition of the fluid, if it's broken down or not. The higher the acid number, the more acidic that fluid has gotten, the more that it's broken down and needs to be changed. And our oxidation number is very low as well too. So, and we don't have any water contamination, so all the seals are good. Of course there's no fuel. So overall, I don't really know exactly why that torque converter was behaving like it is. There's nothing in this report that jumps off the page as being the silver bullet, where you can just go, aha, that's the reason why. But changing the fluid did get rid of that concern. I have not had that problem in about 1,000 miles, and I've been driving it at least a couple of times a week. I'm enjoying driving that car, actually. It's very smooth and quiet, and shifts properly now. So obviously these analysis reports don't test every single quality of a fluid, just the main quality. So there obviously was something wrong in that fluid that caused that problem, otherwise it wouldn't have gone away when I changed it. It might have been just the viscosity. I was really thinking that there'd be a lot of water contamination in there, because I saw what would appear to be evidence of water contamination on the underside of the valve body. It looked like water spots, particularly since the car wasn't driven very much. But that's just a guess. So we'll never know exactly what caused the problem, but we do know that a simple fluid and filter change cured what felt like a very, very expensive problem. You'd have to remove the transmission from the car and replace the torque converter and flush everything out, and that's a pretty major repair. So a little bit of money, a little bit of time, and that problem's gone. And moving on toward the back, I changed the differential fluid, and it only takes 2 quarts. This is a standard Ford 8.8 open differential, non-limited slip, and the iron's a little bit high, not flagged as that normal, but a little bit higher than I would like, 328 parts per million. And if that were the engine would probably be on its last legs, but you have to remember that there's no pressurized lubrication in the differential, and there's no oil filter, so it's just being slung up by the gears. And so there's really nowhere for that iron to go. There is a magnet on the back of the oil fill plug that captures a lot of the iron and other ferrous material, but once that magnet gets a certain amount of buildup on there, the magnetic field strength decreases and it loses its effectiveness to capture more materials. And so the number tends to creep up, and that's why it's always a good idea when you change the fluid to clean off that magnet really well, as best as you can, before you put it on. Nickel, also an alloy, or part of an alloy, in the differential casing and maybe the ring and pinion gears. Shouldn't be much aluminum or copper in the differential. Not sure where those are coming from. If it were a limited slip differential, I would say that the copper is probably part of the clutch pack material, and of course no lead or tin. Just like the transmission, silicon is pretty important because differentials have a vent on the outside of them to help equalize the pressures between inside and outside. And same thing with sodium, coming from possible road salt. Those numbers are fairly low. I wish that were a little bit lower, but it's a good thing it changed, or it's a good thing I changed it. Sorry for the shaky camera, it is rather cold out here. Titanium is pretty high. I'm not really sure where the titanium is coming from. I'm not really sure how the differential is, what materials they've used to construct a differential. Maybe it's part of a special additive package that was in the factory fill gear oil. I haven't really seen it that high before, but rest assured it won't be that high again because the fluid was changed. And then we have our additive metals again, zinc and phosphorus. And one additive that's not tested on this is going to be sulfur. Gear oils have a very unique smell, and that comes from the sulfur phosphorus additive package that they put in there, but sulfur is not one of the ones that's tested for. And viscosity being 13.4 at 212 Fahrenheit is not flagged as being abnormal, but it sort of is, in my opinion, because if we look over here to the gear oil chart, 13.4, it's just a right at the borderline minimum viscosity for 90 weight gear oil, and I don't like things being in the minimum. I like things being on the high side of normal. I'd like that number to be around 22, 23, something like that. So that tells me that that oil was starting to shear down and starting to lose its viscosity. So good thing it was changed. And of course the acid number, just like in the hydraulic fluid, you want to make sure that number is nice and low, and it is. So overall the fluid's in good shape, but starting to shear down and showing its age, even after only 11,370 miles. Definitely time to change that. And then last but not least, I did the power steering unit. A lot of people don't bother changing power steering fluid or even checking their power steering fluid until it starts to make that typical grinding noise or growling noise. And we have some issues. We have iron is very high, 250 parts per million of iron in just a 1-quart system basically. So that's pretty significant, but also typical because there is no oil filter or anything like that in the power steering system. But with only 11,973 miles, that's a lot higher than what I would have thought it would be. And of course we have fairly low values of copper and lead. And the fluid that's in the power steering system is Ford Type F fluid instead of the Mercon, so the additive concentrations are going to be a little bit different. We don't have very much contamination from dirt or salt or anything like that, so that's good. Additive concentrations look fine. Viscosity looks okay, which is nice. The acid number is really good, not even, it's less than 1. But it is showing that it's old, it's fairly oxidized. So definitely time to be changed. Sorry for the little interruption. Being so cold out here, this camera battery really hates it and just fails catastrophically, not even any warning on the view screen I'm looking at. So definitely time to change that fluid. And I think I've made some good improvements to the power steering system to bring these numbers right on down and protect that steering gear and pump, which are expensive to replace and also time consuming and difficult. I went ahead and installed this inline magnifying filter for transmissions and power steering. It's got a little magnet on this end, kind of similar to the magnet you find in your transmission pan, and then a regular paper filter element inside, which is a really good improvement because there was absolutely zero filtration in the system from the factory. So I expect these numbers to be way on down next time I have this analyzed. And then when I changed it, I went in with a synthetic Type F equivalent fluid. And even though it's very cold out here, you can still see, looking in there, just how easy that stuff is to move around and flow. And even on a cold day like this, the steering is actually very smooth and quiet, doesn't make any noise. So I think that I've gotten past a lot of these concerns. So overall, with these reports, it kind of just goes to show you that even though you have what would be considered to be a cream puff, a car that is 18 years old but only has 12,000 miles on it, you think it'd be like new, and in a lot of ways it is, but internally you can't stop those chemical reactions from happening. You can't stop the fluids and things like that from degrading over time. That's just a normal thing that happens over time, and definitely has to be changed, even when you think that there is no reason to change these fluids since it only has 12,000 miles on it. It's best just to go ahead and do it anyway, and give yourself some good insurance and peace of mind.